socialism of the outcome sort, equality of outcome, equal, say, incomes, works in a family, but it doesn't work in the society as a whole, as we've seen over and over again, in large-scale socialist societies. It's not greed is good. Greed is evil. Greed is evil. But ordinary prudence combined with other virtues is not greed. It's an appropriate adult way of behaving. There are only two ways of changing other people's behavior. Either you persuade them to, or you put a gun to their head.
Hello and welcome to this IEA podcast. My name is Reem, Ibrahim, and I'm the Head of Media and Linda Whetstone Scholar here at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Today I have an absolutely fantastic guest with me today, Deirdre McCloskey, who is one of the world's most influential liberal thinkers. She is currently the Isaiah Berlin Chair in Liberal Thought at the Cato Institute and Distinguished Professor Emerita of Economics, History, English and Communication at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her most celebrated works include the Bourgeois Era trilogy, which I had the pleasure of reading when I was a student at university. The Bourgeois Virtues, Bourgeois Dignity and Bourgeois Equality are all part of that trilogy, which together argue that the modern world prosperity emerged not from material forces, but from a moral and rhetorical transformation, the rise of bourgeois dignity and liberty. Her forthcoming book, Equality of Permission, The Primary Liberalism, which is coming out next year, I believe, makes a passionate case for recovering the original liberalism of 1776 and of 1789, the no masters liberalism of voluntary exchange and moral equality, against both conservative hierarchy and progressive statism. Deirdre, I am so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for coming in to see me.
And I'm extremely glad to be here. I had my Cadbury's whole nuts, and I'm perfectly satisfied.
Fantastic. You can't get Cadbury's in the US, can you?
You can't. It's what they did is they turned it over to Hershey's, and they've got a version, but it doesn't taste right.
Oh, God. Well, American chocolate is definitely not as good as ours. Well, let's just set the stage a little bit. Do you want to explain what you mean by equality of permission, and how does that differ with sort of more familiar ideas of equality of opportunity or equality of outcome? You know, what is different about this?
Well, equality of outcome is socialism, and it works very well in a family. We don't want Cinderella to be left home to do the housework while her sisters are off at the ball. We want to treat every child as well, and we want to redistribute from the parents to the children. One doesn't send out one's 6-year-old to work to pay for lunch. So socialism of the outcome sort, equality of outcome, equal, say, incomes, works in a family, but it doesn't work in the society as a whole, as we've seen over and over again, in large-scale socialist societies. Eastern Europe in general, North Korea is kind of an extreme example. And then the other form of material equality that people favor, which I favored for a long time. I thought, gee, that's what I want. Equality of opportunity. Let's start the race of life on the same starting line. And the trouble with that is it can't be achieved. And we can't come substantially close to it either. And after all, if you're born in South Sudan, how are you to be made equal to a French child? Well, I'm afraid the only way is to give you an air ticket and a passport to France. If liberalism means anything, it means cosmopolitanism.
Okay.
We don't just care for the family. If that's all we did, then we'd be fine. We just have families and nothing else. But if we care for the world, if we care for other human beings, and we should. I'm a Christian. I'm an Anglican. We should. Then we should be. Then we should be equal in permission. We shouldn't have obstacles in the way of people. So that's another equality to be taken back for liberalism. Our friends on the left, and I have large numbers of them, they think the only way we can be equal is one of these two material equalities. I call them the equalities of 1848, because that's when they emerged in a very clear form in politics in Europe. And it's the equalities of 1776 and of August, at least, 1789, where we say no masters, not no poor, which was the 1848 claim, and the state to achieve it, but no masters.
And you call this primary liberalism.
And I think it is.
Okay, and what does that mean for an individual? Because effectively what you're saying is equality is not about the material outcome, it's not about how much wealth you have or how many opportunities are available to you in the short term, but it's about the equality of individuals to have unlimited amounts of permission to do those things,
That's
right?
That's right. And it's the limits that are the key here, the unlimited. That doesn't, Abraham Lincoln's father couldn't read. His mother who died couldn't read. His stepmother could, but in any case, he had 2 years of formal education. And yet, this boy didn't want to be a rail splitter for the rest of his life. And he could, and he himself said just this. He was a primary liberal, primary both in the sense that it's the first liberalism. It's unique to the 1700s. Before, there were an occasional upsurging of this in small ways, but it really got going late in the 18th century with Adam Smith, across myself, Mary Wollstonecraft, the rights of women, Tom Paine. That's the liberalism I favor, and it's not look, when populations revolt against a tyranny, as we see all the time, they don't ask for more stuff. They don't ask for better public schools, which I'm in favor of, but they don't ask for them. They ask not to be harassed by the government, not for the thugs to come in the middle of the night, or as is happening in the United States, if you're brown, being seized off the street by a modern Gestapo. So it's the first because it's chronologically the first. And it's the first because it's primary. It's the center. It's what people want. They don't want income. They want dignity.
Is there an aspect of this that comes from sort of natural law in this way, right? Because you sort of talk about the differences for a good society to come about, you need good institutions, but you also need that sort of moral equality and the idea that that individual has that permissionless freedom.
Yeah, I'm struggling a bit with what to say about natural law theories. One problem is that they're very easy to distort into hatreds of gay people or this or that. It doesn't work in some contexts. But on the other hand, the self-ownership, as people often express it, of natural law, it was Adam Smith's favorite argument. He said, the natural, I always stutter on my favorite word, natural liberty is natural, by which he meant it was God-given just there. But I'm not as clear or clear in my own mind as to how to handle this, because I think equality of permission is something that we ought to emphasize, because the word equality has been taken over by the left. The right likes inequality. They prefer hierarchy. I don't. I'm an egalitarian with my friends on the left. But my friends on the left move immediately to this material equality.
Okay, I think that's so interesting, because I don't believe I've ever heard anybody explain those differences, and actually, as a liberal, be using the word equality but without talking about material outcome. I think that's really unique. So, in one of the chapters, you talk about statism, and you say that even in its most moderate forms, it can undermine liberty. Can you explain what that case for a real liberalism actually means in your terms?
Well, it means that you aren't on the spectrum. The standard spectrum from left to right, inherited from the seating plan of the French Assembly. I don't know why we keep talking about it. Some people think that that's all you need to know about politics. Where are you on the spectrum?
Yeah.
So we get journalists coming, speaking of the Cato Institute or speaking to someone from it, and will say, aren't you really the same as those conservatives over at the Heritage Foundation? We say, no, we're not. We're not on the spectrum. We're in a treehouse.
Far away.
A little teeny treehouse looking down on the spectrum with horror, because along the spectrum, everyone's a statist. Whether you're right or left or middle, you want the state to do it. What made for new liberalism in Britain, the term was invented here, and then exported to the rest of the Anglosphere. One said after 1848, and it was articulated in the 1880s, we need the state to come in to make people equal. And that's unliberalism. It's the opposite of primary liberalism. And I think it's unnecessary, and it confuses people, because they think that equality must be about power and violence towards others. And we see in our treehouse, we say, no, dears, just make deals, say hello to people, be nice to people. That's all we ask.
That's fantastic. I love that conception of liberalism. And so, in your mind, where is coercion justified by the state, and where is that limit?
I'm not an anarchist, and there's a kind of cheap argument that both on the right and the left is used against us, which is, oh, you guys are just anarchists, and you don't believe there's any state. There should be any state. And we say, no, there should be a state, but it should be small. And you got to watch it very carefully, because, as Max Weber said in 1919, the very definition of a state is the monopoly of coercion, physical coercion, over a certain area, a certain part of the world. And I say, yeah, for some things, for the Black Death, not for COVID, the power of the state should be exercised. I'm terrified. I can hardly sleep at night over fear of the Canadians invading the state of Maine. I mean, you know those Canadians. They're very aggressive, very dangerous, and we need a big Department of Defense to that. And it's nonsense. We need a small Department of Defense to prevent invasion. We need ICBMs and nuclear weapons to prevent the Chinese and the Iranians and the Russians from using them or threatening us with. So we need a tiny state. We need a foreign service, but one that is helpful instead of obstructive. et cetera, et cetera. But we don't need upwards of 50% of the marketed output of the economy working through the state. In France, it's 55%. In Sweden, at the height of statism, it's now much receded, it was 73% of what people earned was taken by the state. And that's just too damn much.
Yeah. At the moment in the UK, public spending as a proportion of GDP is about 44%, 45%.
44%. It's somewhat smaller in the United States, but not a lot. It's smaller in Japan, but not a lot. And then it's crazy in France.
And there's obviously the obstruction that gives. So why do you think then that modern liberals, people like Francis Fukuyama, for example, end up being in support of a big government?
Well, Frank is a new friend of mine and a very learned man. But he's a statist, and he gets very mad when he gets angry when I say so. Well, you call me a statist. But he is. And the sort of burden of my book, the book is divided into two parts. The first part is a more or less amiable description of what I'm talking about, and making these distinctions between material equality and an absence of obstacles, namely equality of permission, and the distinction between small groups, which should operate on equality of opportunity. If you're going to have a marathon, the elite runners better start at the same starting line, or it's ridiculous. I suppose you could handicap them. That'd be kind of amusing. But so in a small group, it works, but not in large. But the second half of the book is an attack. I get very excited attacking all the moderate statists like Frank. Some of them my friends, some of them close friends, but they're all wrong. And in the second half, if you enjoy sort of aggressive intellectual assaults, turn to the second half.
We'll just skip the first part and go straight to the
first
second.
part, which is kind of boring. Families different from a nation, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, okay. Now here's the meat. He's going after Sandel and Frank and all kinds of people.
Let's talk about culture and that sweet talk aspect of it, the power of persuasion in that way, and rhetoric, which is sort of at the heart of like what we might call liberal civilization.
It is.
How do you think that liberals today could better communicate what that looks like and what persuasion, but also culture in that way, what civilization as a whole looks like?
Well, there are all kinds of problems with this. One is that on the left, and I think if you, in some ways, I actually thought of this, but some ways on the right, but certainly on the left, people believe that persuasion is coercion.
Yeah.
And that's really a big mistake. And yet it's Pettit and other Foucault and so forth talk this way and say, well, and of course that means that there's no liberty because there's no space. If I earnestly try to persuade you of the Pythagorean theorem, that's viewed as an aggression. And this is pazzo, this is crazy. So I want to make a sharp distinction, which is not popular, between physical coercion and verbal argument. And this hits right to the matter of hate speech. I'm a trans woman, and there's a lot of hate speech going around about trans women. In fact, the right in the United States has tried to make it into a big deal, and the left in Britain has tried to make it into a big deal in both. And you know, as we said as children, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names can never hurt me. Now, they do hurt. Someone says, well, every cell in your body says XY. I say, yeah, that's right. I'm guilty as charged. But so bloody what? You weren't born a lawyer or or the fool that you are. You changed. So there's an example of hate speech, which I just don't think it's a smart concept. Let's not. In Brazil, a country that I know slightly, although I don't speak Portuguese, a comedian named Luis, that's his last name, is under a sentence of 8 years in prison. He's probably not going to serve it, but 8 years in prison for making fun of people. And I've seen his act. I've seen it in Portuguese. And what he does is he invites people from the audience to come up on the stage so he can make fun of them. Very short people. Brings them up and then makes jokes about how short they are. Or I saw him do this. A man with one leg, he brought him up. And it's not, I know. But the short people and the man without leg laugh. They think it's funny too. So come on. They volunteer to be victim, and yet some hate speech law was violated.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because this is the difference between sort of culture and civilization. I think it was at the Bloomington and Virginia schools that spoke about us as students of civilization, that actually, if you want to talk about economic liberalization, you have to talk about that and the impact on culture. And I think you do that very well, where you're talking about relationships. And, even when you're in the workplace, you are building relationships and families, community. Community isn't separate to individualism, but it means that it's voluntary, it's a choice, and it isn't done by coercion.
And it's not done by the state.
Yes, community doesn't come from the government.
It doesn't come from the government. In fact, when it does come from the government, it comes out as nasty forms. Nationalism, for example. Now, I'm proud of being an American, and my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty and all that. But that doesn't mean I have to hate every other country. I love Britain, for example. I love cricket, to show you how insane I am. But the Finnish national anthem has a very interesting verse. First verse says, "Oh, Finland, wonderful, wonderful, lots of lakes and forests," which it mainly is. And then the second verse says, "But other countries love their country too, other people in other countries, and we should all get along together." Now that's what I believe. Whereas nationalism, a state-run attempt to instantiate or make for community, causes wars. There's absolutely no question about it.
It's interesting because obviously culture comes from the people, right? Yeah. Culture is people, it's community, it's people making those voluntary decisions to become friends or lovers or families. And actually, I think a lot of our current politicians are some of the most culturally inept, so I'm not sure where the argument comes from. I want to talk a bit about your bourgeois era trilogy and how your new book coming out next year on sort of this permissionless liberty builds on those arguments. And let's start by talking about the bourgeois trilogy. I remember reading it when I was at university and thinking it was fantastic because you were able to sort of challenge the conventional wisdom that, the West is rich because colonialism, imperialism, all of this stuff. It's fundamentally about coercion. And you talk about the sort of Manchester, the Manchester Liberals, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Could you just outline what that looks like? I mean, I guess the question is how did the West become rich?
Here's the crucial thing. It became rich not by expropriation, cruelty to the working class or to Indians or Africans. Not that. Nor investment. Now, here I get into trouble. People say, oh, no. Capital accumulation is what made us rich. No, it didn't. The ideas for capital accumulation made us rich. The ideas for reallocating the labor force. The ideas for entirely new products. I mean, when I'm speaking in such circumstance, I'm always amazed at how small the cameras are. They're little teeny things. You could carry them around in your purse. And yet, 30 years ago, these cameras were this big and weren't as good. So it's innovation that had companies invest in making those. Now you can say, well, capital's necessary. Well, for some innovations, it's not. Apps don't require any capital. You just think up some crazy new app and you make $1 million. So it's innovation that's crucial. Now, then the question is, it turns away from what Marxists on the one hand and bourgeois economists on the other say, namely exploitation and capital accumulation, turns away from capital accumulation, says, why do we innovate? And we innovate because we're liberated. Some woman, and it's not just high-level entrepreneurs. We're always talking about them, and they're not the only innovators. A worker who moves from Wales, South Wales, to London because the pits have closed is taking a leap in the dark, is taking a great stride. He didn't want to. He would have preferred to go on in How Green Is My Valley, but he's the entrepreneur. A woman who opens a hair salon in her neighborhood, which needs it. She's taking a leap, and she puts her heart and soul into this, just as some high-level entrepreneur making steel or something does. And that's what we were permitted to do. And that's why permission is so crucial.
Do you think that the fact that we now have moved away from that permissionless, I mean, we just spoke about how large the state is in basically all of the Western world. Do you think that the increasing encroachment of the government and their ability to say yes or no to everything?
Oh, it's just thick on the ground.
Yeah.
In the 1700s in France, as against Britain, to build a new water mill, you needed permission of a commission in Paris, regardless of where you were, in Nice or Bordeaux. The same thing is essentially true now. Take the Town and Country
Planning Act. We spoke about this morning.
Act, a hideous piece of legislation which Attlee brought in. That this is a terrible, terrible thing. Look. Modern economists, the ones who get the Nobel Prizes, recently especially, which is a terrible tendency, they're all statists. And their justification is for bringing the state in is externalities. Now, the trouble with externalities is that they're everywhere in society. Someone may object to my outfit. You're wearing red, that means you're a communist, or I don't know, you're the people's flag is deepest red or something. That everyone can get offended by everything. That's why speech needs to be absolutely protected. And we bump into each other. No person is an island entire of itself. Each man is a piece of the continent, a part of a man. And that's what society is. So, fixing every externality is a formula for complete domination of our personal lives by someone in Whitehall or someone in the White House. And I say, no, We need to make the states smaller in expenditure and in regulation. And that doesn't mean my grandmother grew up in the age of the end of horses. She grew up in the 1890s. And she used to say, she had a kind of, her version of permission, equality of permission was, do anything you want, but don't spook the horses. Don't throw a stick of dynamite into the middle of a Piccadilly Circus and the horses are all frightened in this. No. So for big badnesses towards other people, you bet. Bring in the police. A small police force whom we watch very carefully. That's the good society.
It's interesting because the way that you describe that is, I think, very radically different to the way that we currently live and the way that the size of the government at least. And, we see technocracy, but also, the welfare state is absolutely enormous. Can you just challenge the idea that redistribution is how those people will have the best outcomes? We spoke about the Town and Country Planning Act, these regulations, the fact that it's no, you can't build that thing, it's too big, it's too small, it doesn't, you need too many windows, you have too many windows, you need less windows, the fact that the government and councils, at least in this country, have so much power over what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and then the things that do get built end up not making very much profit, so they don't really care about it, so it's really low quality. Why is that the case? And people that support these kind of regulations are sort of do-gooders.
In our own lives, we plan. I'm planning my afternoon activities. I think I'll go to, where will I go? I'll probably go to the National Gallery.
Lovely.
So, okay. And we plan next week, and we plan our lives. But any adult knows that planning doesn't always work. We have to do it. Businesses have to do it. Individuals have to do it. Governments have to do it. But to think that you can lay down the future, that you can regulate the future, that you can make it happen just as you want is mad.
Yeah.
And an example of it is this economist, Mariana Mazzucato, who teaches in Britain. I'm not sure she still does, but anyway, she's here. And she advises many governments. And surprise, surprise, the politicians love to hear her because she says governments should take over innovation policy.
Industrial policy.
Now, wait a second. If a bureaucrat in Whitehall or anywhere else in the town council of Leeds knew the future, what is she doing in the planning office or in the Leeds council? Why doesn't she start a business and make money out of it? Buy a Caribbean island to abuse young women on? Why can't she make an unlimited fortune? Because this is actually quite fundamental criticism of what we call economic policy, such as from the Bank of England. If the people at the Bank of England knew what they were doing, why do they remain at the Bank of England? Why don't they start their own bank and make a fortune? Because if you can steer down the road without killing people in a dense fog, and your brakes are working and you're steering, you know what you're doing. You can see through the fog. That's the claim of policy. So there's a deep sense in which the planning and advice from the government is just silly. There was an episode not too long ago in Sweden, which, by the way, is much more liberal after the 1990s than it once was for a long time. But literally, the health department, some fool in the health department, issued a what would you call it, advice on how many millimeters of toothpaste to put on your brush.
That's insane. That's absolutely
One
insane.
of the reasons that people in Britain,
Have very bad teeth.
well, voted against the EU and is that the EU was going to declare that Cadbury's was not chocolate. It's actually
Now that's treason.
I know, and it really irritated a lot of people. It was not. I don't think it's a famous episode in people's minds, but it actually happened, and they had to withdraw it because the British government said, "What are you talking about?" But it's because it didn't have enough cocoa in it,
As a proportion, because the government's decision about what is
because
chocolate.
The government knows how to make chocolate better than Cadbury's does, and I'm telling you, it doesn't.
And this is fundamentally...
Cadbury's whole nut is ambrosia.
It's delicious. We must get you some to take home with you on your flight.
Please do.
This is really fundamental to the differences and effectively why central planning doesn't work, right? Because there is an arrogance to statists.
Tremendous arrogance.
The arrogance is that I know exactly what is going to happen and therefore we're able to plan the economy based in, in this room, we know exactly what's going to happen.
Sure.
When in reality, Hayek wrote about this. In the knowledge problem, this knowledge is completely dispersed throughout society. Every single person across the economy makes different decisions, and we have no idea why they make those decisions. They might not even know themselves.
And that's the key point. Even at there's this excellent Catholic social teaching, which speaks of the word subsidiarity, and says that even if local, fire protection is not as efficient as, centralized fire provision. If it can be done, it should be done. Get as close to the people as possible. That's what it says. And that makes a great deal of sense to me. But, even when you get down to the people don't know. I mean, they are, they're people. They're like you and me. They don't know what the future is. Things may happen, and they have to adjust. So it's not as if we can plan the future. That's not saying don't plan. You've got to try to plan. You've got to be ordinarily adult-style prudent, but you can't expect it to work out. If you've had any experience of life, you know that. That's why young people are often, having just come from a socialized institution called the family, and thinking their parents are all wise. If they're teenagers, they might not, but they think that they can choose what to do completely by themselves and know what to do, and of course they don't.
Let's talk about the personal and what this means for personal moral life in the way that you described it in this book. So I've written down here that you spoke a little bit about the ethic of adulthood, and I think you mentioned it, sort of thinking about this as like a self-respecting and an other-respecting individual. So in your mind, what does that mean for moral life? What does that mean for ethics in that
It's
way?
terribly important that we not reduce social life, personal life, to calculation, to prudence alone. We're humans. We love. We have a sense of justice and moderation and hope and faith, courage. Those all need to figure. And so we need ethics now. What's the formula? In the long 18th century, there were developed from Locke to Bentham a whole series of little formulas for how to be good. Whereas the ancients and St. Thomas Aquinas and the whole ethical tradition in the West and in the East of ethical thinking was to focus on individual virtues. It's called in philosophy these days virtue ethics. And that's what the first book of the trilogy was about, saying is a life in business or as a consumer in an economy? Can it be an ethical life? And I concluded, yeah, it can, and it should be. I'm not, it's not greed is good. Greed is evil. Greed is evil. But ordinary prudence combined with other virtues is not greed. It's an appropriate adult way of behaving. In fact, I'm for calling liberalism, one reason for changing its name is that I always stutter on the word. I'm in favor of calling it adultism because that's what it is. It's take responsibility for yourself and your family. Be charitable. If you see someone falling down on the street, go to their aid. Be the good Samaritan. But don't say, okay, that means we should have a state forcing people to be good Samaritans. That's not going to work. It's evil. No, I think that it's not institutions. Earlier you said, well, Deirdre's in favor of such and such institutions. Not really. The burden of this new book and some other books I've done in the meantime is that neo-institutionalism, which people talk about a lot, is not adequate. Adding institutions and stirring, as though adding spice to a stew, doesn't work. You can't just give people in Pakistan robes and wigs and then expect to get English law out of it. You've got to have a tradition in Pakistan, as actually they do in the legal profession, descended from English law, of professionalism and seriousness in enforcing justice. So I think it all comes down to widespread ethical convictions. You can call them ideology. You can call them the spirit of the age. I'm, as I think I mentioned, I'm an Anglican. I'm a Christian. And I think Jesus' version of the golden rule, do unto others, combined with Hillel of Babylon's version about 50 years earlier, don't do to others what you don't want to have done to yourself. You put those two together, you've got the gospel of love and the gospel of justice. Put those two together, and then let people get on with it if they have those, as we normally do in our ordinary social lives or our married life. We're trying to be loving and just. We don't run into people on the street on purpose. We exercise adult love and justice.
Do you reject Ayn Rand's view of altruism? I know you have a chapter on this in your upcoming book. What do you think about the Randian objectivist view of altruism and its sort of the selfishness as a virtue?
I think she's got it completely wrong. She's turned everything, again, it's like Bentham, turning everything into self-interest. And by the way, her followers usually had sex with her. This is a disgraceful feature of this woman's behavior. She dominated them intellectually. They all said, oh, Ayn, you're so great. I love everything you say. And then she hopped into bed with them when they were married often. And this was a cruel and terrible thing to do. And then she would justify it with her so-called ethics. Now, that's an example of a little formula for ethics, which doesn't take the wisdom of novels, poetry, plays, philosophy, history into account. It doesn't take account of the humanities, so to speak, the arts subjects, which I believe are essential for a free society. We can't just be engineers. I love engineers. I've learned a lot from engineers. But we can't just be social engineers. Down that path lies tyranny.
When you talk about primary liberalism, if we take that seriously as a genuine concept that is sort of a first principled basis for what that means to have a permissionless society, what would change from the status quo, from what we have now?
Take a very important, here's a very easy example, tariffs. Get the damn tariffs to zero. Donald Trump doesn't want like that. He's got a fool for an advisor, and anyway, he believes it. He believes that coercing people with tariffs is the way to go. Threatening them and bluster and so on is how to do things. He's got a kind of mafia style. Make him an offer he can't refuse. And that should stop instantly, because who says the government should tell you who you can buy from? What? I'd like to be able to buy the Cadbury's version of whole nut. Instead, I'm forced in the United States to buy, I don't buy it, it's horrible, Hershey's version. Because Cadbury's has licensed Hershey's to make whole nut in the same package. It looks similar. And it's rubbish. And I'm not going to, I think it's terrible. I should be able to I can't import fish and chips from York. That's what I'd like to do. I have to go to York to get them. But so that's one. But a very big one, and it's getting worse and worse, is professional licenses. In the United States in 1950, about 5% of occupations required a state-enforced license, whether granted directly by the state or through an organization such as the American Medical Association or state medical boards, which then enforced it. Now, in the United States, and it's probably true in Britain too, the same kinds of laws cover 30% of employees, of workers. This is crazy. We don't need professional licensing. It's ridiculous that in the United States, to get to be a lawyer, you have to go to law school. There's absolutely no reason for that. In fact, in the United States, you can't go to law school at 18. You have to first go 4 years to university, then go to law school. And it's worse in medicine. In the state of Florida until recently, to become an interior decorator, you had to have a state-issued license, so that the horrible outcome of an insufficiently yellow color for your living room would happen. I mean, think of the terror.
That would be awful.
That would be awful. And I'm not against private certification. You go to Harrods, you've got a money-back guarantee on the junk that you buy there. You go to, fly-by-night department store, and you don't. Well, as we say in the States, you pays your money and you takes your choice. You're free to take the extra insurance of only buying your stuff at Harrods or not. And so we don't need consumer protections. What really protects consumers is a free press, which is absolutely essential.
And it's choice.
Choice, monitored by the press. And for that matter, I've actually heard what are called liberals in the United States, which is used in the United States to mean left wing, say things like, well, if we don't have food inspectors, restaurants are going to put poison in their food.
I don't think they'd have many customers if they did that.
What would be the point? You say, geez, I hated this restaurant and I felt sick for days. you better not go there, and sure enough, people won't.
Yeah.
That's what really enforces.
And because of the free press and having bad reviews, and you can see and you say, well, God, that place has 0 stars and those people got 6, so I'm not going to go there. And that place is going to have the impact of the market and therefore probably not make very much money or money at all.
It's dangerous to do this in Britain, but because you have very strict rules of liability. And maybe I won't be specific about it, but there is a very popular pub right in the center of Oxford that exploits the tourists by giving them a ploughman's for lunch, which is the worst ploughman's I've ever had in my life. The ploughman's lunch was invented after the war.
Yes, it was by the marketing board. Is that right?
It was a marketing thing they wanted to keep people in the pubs, and so they invented it. It's not ancient.
No.
Ploughman, schmauman, come on, stop it. It's a lie, but that's okay. It's a friendly lie, and good ploughmans with excellent cheddar cheese and nice crisp bread. Those onions you keep putting in it, I don't understand the point of them, but still, this one was terrible. The cheese was awful. The bread was. I'm not going to go on because I'll get sued.
Especially in this country.
But that's the kind of information you need. You don't need.
And you say that maybe you'll write it in a Google review and then, other people may not go. But that's crucial, right? You need the permissionless society in which those market signals are actually able to exist in the first place in order for people to be able to make those choices.
Persuasion, rhetoric, as you said before, is the heart of a liberal society. People believe that there's something in between physical coercion and sweet talk. That there's some third thing that the government has special insight into. This middle, that, no, it's not coercion. We voted for it after all. We voted Tory, and so we got what we got on the one hand. Or you send the cops and they force you to do it. And there's no such thing. There are only 2 ways of changing other people's behavior. Either you persuade them to, or you put a gun to their head. Now look, children need to be coerced. If your 3-year-old boy proposes to run out in the traffic, you don't initiate a liberal sweet talk conversation to him about the desirability of staying alive. You grab him. He's running out, you grab him. Okay, that's coercion. In fact, I have a chart that I devised in my debate with James Robinson, one of the guys who got the Nobel Prize in 1984. And it shows human flourishing against coercion. Private coercion, like people stealing from you, or public coercion by regulating, taxing, and so on. And our friends on the left and on the right both believe that more coercion is a great thing. Let's have more of that. More and more and more. And we liberals say, wait a minute, guys. Ever heard of the principle of diminishing returns? Come on. This curve starts going down eventually. You get the share of government and expenditure, or the amount of coercions you do too high. Free societies depend on a limit to coercion.
Let's end on an optimistic note. Do you feel optimistic about the future of liberalism? I think specifically in the terms that you put it, Deirdre, the sort of idea that we have, we need to think about liberalism as permissionless. You have unlimited permission to do whatever it is that you would like to pursue and pursue those values that may lead to a flourishing life. I think with AI, we have perhaps won the argument that we need to have a permissionless society in which we're able to innovate. And then, perhaps if the government is going to implement regulations at some point as the problems occur, rather than regulating at the first place.
Yeah. Would you like the House of Commons chosen, I'm very nicely, and very intelligent people, most of them. Some of them are not. But would you like them to be deciding what to do with AI? And my answer is no. For God's sakes, keep them away from that. It'd be like saying that they should regulate airplane design. They don't know what they're talking about. I don't think AI is the crucial thing. I think freedom of the press is. And I'm very concerned about extensions of government regulation. Until 1967, drama in London was regulated by pre-permission from a government censor. In 1967, it was freed, but before that, not. I don't think that that's a good idea. I think we should have a free press, and that's the center.
I think that's the battleground that we're going to.
That's the battleground. People are extending this matter of hate speech in I think a very foolish way, and indeed AI and others, they would like to regulate what this or that entrepreneur on the internet says. I am optimistic. I'm optimistic because I think that in people's heart is a desire for freedom. But there is always the desire to be a child. You can be an adult and be free, or you can be a child and a ward of the state. Take your pick.
Deirdre, it's an absolute pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed that conversation, and I think that you've explained some pretty important truths there, which have been wonderful. It's always a pleasure to see you, and we need to make sure we get you some Cadbury's nut chocolate. I think you get it as a reward. Whole nut Cadbury's. And thank you to all of you for watching and listening. If you want to check out Equality of Permission, The Primary Liberalism, it's going to be published by University of Chicago, is that right? In 2026. And if you would like to learn more about the IEA's work, then do check out insider.iea.org.uk.